sales. This is going to be a great talk by Jane Guthrie. She's going to share learnings from her 12 years as a user experience strategist, working both for large Fortune 500 companies such as Old Navy, Coke, Cox Communication, and also icon agencies such as Crispin Porter. Today, Jane is a UX consultant for Slalom in Atlanta, and Jane has expertise in information architects, visual interface, interaction design, strategy, and project stewardship. So help me welcome Jane to our next session.
I kind of want to stand right where this table is.
All right, we can move that.
Okay, sweet. Well, thanks, guys. Last session of the day, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully it won't be too boring. Okay, so as many people know who know me, that I love food, and one of my favorite shows on TV is Chopped. So on Chopped, I'm sure you've seen it, there's 4 contestants, and each time on each show they have a chance to win $10,000, and they get this mystery basket of ingredients. They don't get a lot of prep time, and they're just kind of asked to cook these 3 courses. So sometimes the courses are really weird. On this one show, they had a blue-footed chicken, a bottle of tequila, broccolini, and dried limes. And the judges, you know, I love her face in this. She's like kind of dubious, but these guys are kind of excited. But ultimately, they're judging the food on three different things: on creativity, like how did they use the ingredients? Was it an interesting use? What was the presentation like? Was it nice to look at before they ate it? And sometimes it's not. And what does it taste like? So I'm watching the show one night, and I turned to my husband and I'm like, God, this sounds so familiar. This is exactly what I do as a user experience designer. I get this wacky basket of ingredients each time, right? And we're asked to like create magic, you know, do something really spectacular. And the ingredients aren't always awesome. Sometimes they're old designs or something somebody drew on a napkin. Sometimes it's like data, but it's not complete, and we're always asked to create something awesome. So I thought, well, in an ideal world, what would be the ingredients I would need to create an awesome UX project? And if I had a vision, what would those ingredients be? And to me, those ingredients are context, content, and presentation. So we'll dive right in. So what do I mean by context? Well, I really mean your audience. Who are you presenting to? And thinking about what their needs are and what their goals are. And the first audience you need to consider is your internal team. Sometimes we're always thinking about our clients and our stakeholders, but your internal team has needs too, right? These are the folks who are going to go in and help you realize your vision and make your dream possible. And you want to make sure you get them on board. So their needs may be something like understanding the background of your idea, understanding the user. You're probably an expert on the user side. You've done some research, and this is your chance to share that information with them. And they also want to know what's expected of them. No one likes to come in at the very tail end of something and be asked to like do their best work. They want to be brought in at the beginning. Even if you don't use them till later, they want to know what's going on, because that creates a feeling of collaboration. Now your external audience, your stakeholders, your clients, these are people who have different needs altogether. They're thinking about very different things. They're thinking about money, right? They want to know how it's going to affect their bottom line. They're thinking about business goals, or maybe how they're going to differentiate themselves from the competition and stay relevant. They've got a completely different set of needs. Now we often talk about empathy when we think about our users, right? Thinking about what our users' needs are, and like how do we walk in their shoes and all those things, but we don't really talk about having empathy for our clients, because sometimes their feedback is like this, right? We've all gotten a response like that, or maybe like this, or my favorite is this, right? I worked on this website for a couple of years once for a luxury hotel company, and they just wanted to talk about their press release. They're like, Jane, is this going to be the most awesome press release ever? And I'm like, well, what about your product? So when we get a response like this, it's easy to come back from a design review and make fun of them, right? It's sort of like favorite thing to do is to demonize the client. we come back and we're like, they just don't get it. They get it. We're designers, right? We get it. They don't share our passion. They don't speak our language. But when we do that, it's like gossip. It starts to erode the integrity of the relationship. And we never really stop to think like, well, if their comments were so off, did we do something wrong? Did we really understand what their needs are? So I really like this quote because, you know, sometimes we're not really grasping really the needs and the challenge of the client. We're off designing our solution and we're not thinking about, hey, what did they really need in the first place? Could they be right? Could we be wrong? So where I want to get to with this is to think about compromise, and not in a negative way, because compromise seems like you're settling. Like you went out on a bad date or a series of bad dates and you're like, okay, I'm going to settle. It's not the same thing. All I'm saying with compromise is that you have to pick your battles. You can't fight about everything. When I started off as a designer at IBM, I fought about everything. I was really passionate about my designs, and if they asked me like, hey, move this to the left, I would fight about moving it to the left, right? And now I don't fight about small things because those things are unimportant sometimes, and there's always different ways to accomplish your goals. So just pick your battles. And so when you go into your next client review, really listen to your client and don't fight so much, and find a place to come together. Because if you don't, your vision will never be realized. You'll never make the thing you're trying to make in the first place. So in the past couple of years, we've heard a lot about this, right? UX being C-level. I think it's super exciting because we're being invited to have conversations at this level. But a lot of us don't know how to speak this language. It's scary. We haven't had the education, we haven't had the background to go in and have conversations with C-level executives. And when we go in, we're only thinking about our design work. We're not thinking about this giant ecosystem of a business. But we have to get educated. We have to understand some of these other aspects of the business. If we're not experts, that's okay, right? But you can't just think, you know, I'm just designing this thing and that's it. So we don't want to have a situation like this when we go in and talk to folks at the C-level. You want to be speaking the same language. So your vocabulary has to kind of extend, and you have to understand how to speak about these things, because if you can't speak about them, they're never going to listen to your design ideas, right? Your vision is just never going to happen. So I talked to one of my colleagues, Eric Breyer, smart guy, about how do you get started in learning how to speak this language, and he had some advice. He said, you know, it's easy. Just get more involved at work by playing some business roles, right? You can get out of your little wheelhouse and get uncomfortable and go do something else. People are always willing to help. Take business classes. There's so many. You know, you don't have to go get an MBA to do this stuff. You can just take a class in something you're interested in. You can also find mentors. I think people are generally honored when you ask them to be a mentor. So just make sure you have a specific goal in mind when you're doing that and you're not wasting people's time. And you can also just read. And we all read all the time. We have a lot of information, but you can get more structured about reading. You can pick a book, start a book club, and find people that are interested in the same thing you're interested in. And he also pointed out that you can't underestimate the difference in mental models, like what you understand and what your clients and stakeholders understand, because it's really not the same thing. So last year I had an opportunity to sit down with Mark Ralston, and he ran Frog Design Creative for over 20 years, and he talked about presenting bold ideas. You know, he's had a lot of time presenting bold ideas, and he said that he uses 3 different lenses to talk about ideas when he's telling stories. The first lens is a narrative lens, and this is your Don Draper. So this is going in, being romantic about it, seducing them, being persuasive. This story has a logical structure. Then there's the experiential lens, and the experiential lens is let them see the thing. You made the thing, let them play with the thing, let them experience it and form their own ideas. So you go into that kind of presentation with your prototype that you made, the video you made, the rough 3D model of what you made, and let them figure out how to use it, and then go from there. And then you have the parametric lens, and this is when you talk about the details of how it works, right? These are the functions, you turn this on, you turn this off, and this is how it is. And that's appropriate for certain audiences, maybe more technical audiences, people who really want to get into the details. So you kind of have these three different lenses, and you can figure out maybe how do I make it personalized for the specific audience I'm talking to. Now, sometimes we go into presentations and we have a cold audience. We don't know much about them, and that's really tough. But most of the time, for the projects that we make, we know something about our audience, right? We've either sold the account, and now we're going in as a project team to make something, or you work internal to an organization and you're just trying to sell an idea through to your stakeholders. I think it's important to be really transparent with this audience. You need to be able to progressively disclose the evolution of your ideas. That's a really important concept. In my last project, ultimately, it was successful, but it took a while to get there. But we really tried to engage the stakeholders in our process, and it was kind of painful, you know. You know how to do things, you want to kind of just do them and design them, but we had to bring them along in our process and show them, like, this is what the competitors do, these are best practices, and then they stopped fighting us so much. So in the end, when we got to our design work, they didn't have crazy radical changes, because that's what kills the project, right at the end, you have your crazy radical changes. Now, politics are really, really fun, as is this animated GIF. Okay, I guess we're done watching that. I wanted to talk about politics for a minute because I think it's kind of like the invisible person in the room. And sometimes having a great idea and being able to execute it is not enough. So my last project was like this. I really related to this show very much. And when I was putting together this deck, I thought, well, how do they depict politics in Game of Thrones? Like, how do they do that? They have so many different houses and so many fighting families, and how do they do it? How did they depict it? So I did some research online, and I found this cool graphic of these houses, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of stakeholders, right? I was like, this relates to my project. These are my stakeholders. So in this version of it, they just kind of had different circles, and it's not the most effective. And they're like, okay, this is what is happening between all the different houses. Well, all I can see from this chart is that there are a lot of enemies, right? And I don't remember who the houses are anymore because there were too many, but I know they're fighting. And then finally, I like this one because it was super clear. These are my stakeholders. These are all the people on the show and, you know, what houses they belong to. But I'd like some more information about these folks. So when I started thinking about my stakeholders, and I hope you get the joke. You get the joke? Okay, cool. All right. When I started thinking about stakeholders, I was like, well, who are stakeholders? The way I like to define it is just basically interested parties in your project. These are the people who care. And last year at the IA Summit in San Diego, Gene Smith from Inform in Canada, he did a session about stakeholder mapping. And for me, that was the most important session of the event because I was dealing with this Game of Thrones project. It was killing me. I didn't get the politics. And if I had maybe listened to his talk before the project started, I would have been more successful. So why do we bother with stakeholder mapping? Like, why it seems like a lot of work? For me, it's the fact that it's a repeatable methodology that ultimately makes you more successful in your projects. And this doesn't mean it's just for UX work. This is for any project, for any organization. It's a great methodology to do at the core, at the beginning. To get started with it, so in his talk he was saying, like, he went over a lot of different stakeholder mapping systems, and I won't go into that because that's like an hour talk in itself. But at the end, he created kind of a hybrid approach, and I'm going to cover that because I think it's applicable to what we do. And you can adapt it to what you need if you go back to work and, you know, it doesn't make sense. You can do what you need to do. So the first thing he did, Gene Smith, G-E-N-E Smith. So I'll have the deck downloadable, and I have all the different stuff in there. So So the first thing they did when they started the stakeholder mapping is they identified all the players, all of the stakeholders in their organization. And for them, that was a formal exercise. They actually got a workshop together and they identified for their project 180 stakeholders. Your projects may not be that big, my projects are not that big, but you can make it a less formal activity and just kind of invite people to that conversation that know about the client, that know about your customer, that have worked in your organization before, just who have context for what you're doing, and start to figure out who all the players are. Once you figure out who they are, you can start to categorize them. So they had 3 categories of stakeholders. They had their end users, they had the people working on the project, the actors, and they also had the owners. These are people who can make or break your project, your business owners. For me, that's what that meant. And then they did a second level of categorization between the internal folks and the external folks, and that was really helpful too. So after they did this categorization of all of their people, they plotted them on this matrix. And the matrix I really like because it's simple. You have expectations here across the top, and some people have lower expectations and some have higher. Then you also have your environment. And some people are less ready for change here, and others are more ready for change. So when you map people, you might get something like this. You get these clusters of stakeholders in the different quadrants. And this is interesting because then you start to see patterns. And all these quadrants can mean very different things. So just in this example, I highlighted these 2 quadrants. So in the bottom right, you have stakeholders who are less ready for change or less ready for something to happen, but who also have high expectations. So what does that mean? You might have these stakeholders, and these are your owners, who are external to the organization in this example, who are less ready for change. So there's something in their minds or something in an organization that's going to prohibit them from being ready for you to do what you need to do. So that means you need to address that. That means that you may need to engage them in a different way to understand their specific challenge. Or these are the folks that you can bring along in your design reviews. Maybe they just don't get what you're doing and they just want to be educated. So you can start to assess these different areas of risk separately. So each quadrant has different areas of risk, right? So if you had clusters here or here, they all mean different things. Now what does that mean? What's the outcome of all this? One of the things it can help you do is to position your work with the owners. It can help you advocate for access to important stakeholders. Maybe you didn't realize you needed to talk to someone, but now you do, and you need to ask for that. Designers are more involved. Like, designers don't usually have these kinds of political conversations, right? We don't want to get involved like that, but maybe we need to, because ultimately we want to be successful. And then we may orchestrate our design reviews to engage the right people, and that's where you can use those different lenses we talked about, the parametric, the experiential, and so forth, to decide what these people need to see. And this gives us a reason to engage stakeholders in our design and research. Now, I think this work is really important because it's at the core of what we're doing at the very beginning. It's addressing things at an invisible level, right? Nobody talks about the politics. Nobody tells you when you're going in to sell an account what people's motivations are and what they're trying to accomplish. You know, you could have Joffrey sitting there just wanting to destroy everybody, and you're just going in there to build a prototype or something, and you don't know all the agenda, right? So I think this is really good work, and if I can make an analogy, I like to think of it as a garden, because in a garden you have lots of different things that influence the growth of that garden. It could be the moisture of the soil, the position of the sun, the angle of the sun, how many hours you get a day. There are all these factors. So just planting a seed or having an idea, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen for you. You need to work to create the right environment for that idea to flourish. Okay, so that was context. And now we'll talk about content. So this is what your vision is about. And like as we pointed out at the beginning, like you're a salesperson, you're always selling your ideas. As a user experience designer, I find it's kind of a tough job because you're always trying to convince somebody of something. You're always selling an idea, right? You want to do it different, you want to do it like this. So you have to be persuasive. And you also want to be able to tell a story. You want to take people on a journey. Now, if I can stay with my food analogy for a second. So we talked about at the beginning different ways to tell your story, different ways to make your key points. But the meat of your sandwich is still your vision. So once you're able to speak the language of your stakeholders and relate to them and bring them along, you still have to sell an idea. And that means you have to define your vision. So I have a friend, his name is Brandon, and every week we get together and he has a new app idea, right? Doesn't everybody have a friend like that? Who's like always trying to create that $1 million or $10 million app? But he hasn't really thought it through. So when I talk to him about it, I always take him through a little process of defining the vision. And I call it the big 5 W's, or just 5 questions you need to ask. And if you can answer all of these questions, then your idea has legs. The first question you need to be able to answer is what are you building? What are you proposing? Is it an app? Is it a digital experience with a physical component? Is it some physical experience with a digital component? What is it? Who is it for and what's their payoff? So who is your audience? And this is really important. Why do they care? I mean, there's a million apps, right? The marketplace is saturated. Why should they care about your product? Why are we creating it? You know, Eric Ries talked about this in his keynote. Did somebody just ask you to go in a room and come up with a cool idea? Or are you actually trying to solve a problem? Is there a need for it in the marketplace? Like, why are you making this thing? How does it work? You need to be able to be that savvy. So this is an opportunity to partner with someone technical, perhaps, if it's that kind of idea, and figure out how it works. You don't have to write a dissertation. It could just be a couple of paragraphs, but I've done this so many times, so you quickly start to see the gaps. And what are the risks? Every project has risks. There's never enough time, there's never enough money, there's always somebody else competing with you. How do you mitigate those risks? You need to be able to at least start to answer those questions. And they're really uncomfortable sometimes because it means your idea may not be awesome. But unless you can do that, then you know you should move forward. Establishing your credibility. So we talked at the beginning about kind of establishing your credibility by speaking the language of your stakeholders. But you're a SME, you're a subject matter expert and maybe in design. You're an information architect, you're a researcher, you're a usability expert, whatever you are, you know about your domain and you have to be able to speak the language of your domain. The problem is sometimes when you go into presentations, you wind up creating sentences like this, which mean nothing, right? And we've been in those talks where people throw around design language and it just makes me kind of sick on the inside a little bit. So you don't want to sound like this. You want to be educated and you want to not alienate people with terminology. You want to be able to relate to them. So you just kind of want to sound smart and not like a douchebag. And you also, I think it's important to not forget to be emotional, and pets are nice to use, kittens and puppies, but no, seriously, you know, tell a story, relate to people, you know, be personal. And finally, I wanted to talk about fidelity. So I like the word fidelity because it means different things. But for us, we're going to talk about design fidelity. And in your presentations, it's important to think about the right fidelity of your idea and who you're presenting to. You know, sometimes a sketch will be okay. Sometimes, you know, a wireframe may be okay. Sometimes you just need to make the thing for people to get it. This is not a sign I've encountered driving, but I found it online. And when we see this, like, we're like, what the heck, what do we do, where do we go? It's really confusing. And a lot of times our audience feels like this when we're presenting to them because they don't really understand our idea. Now, we don't want to do that. I've spent a lot of years making wireframes and presenting wireframes. I think once I presented 100 pages of wireframes to a client, and I went through page by page and annotation by annotation. I was like, "Don't you get it?" And they nodded, "Yes, we get it. Please stop. We get it. We get it." But I don't think they ever really got the thing, right? Because they couldn't. Like, as a designer, you have this vision in your mind of how it works and how it flows from page to page, but they can't really ever hold that in their minds. So this quote is also nice because it, clients don't necessarily get abstract concepts, and they need to see it in the final medium. So you need to get creative about how you're presenting ideas. If you don't want to build the thing, get creative about how you're presenting your work. That means, you may do all of these things, right? So if you did this great research report and it was 30 pages and you created a Word file and you sent that around your company, nobody's going to read your thing. Nobody wants to read your awesome research report. And that's sad because I like writing them. But if you had made an infographic of that report, maybe it was printed and put on somebody's cubicle wall, maybe it was shared on social media, it just has a lot more chance of being read and heard and understood if it's presented in a medium that people can relate to easily. I just had a conversation with someone right outside the door before I started talking, and she said that, it's hard, it's hard for certain people to understand our terminology, but if you just show them a video of a user and what their experience was with the product, then that communicates so much, so get out of all the reams of paper and get creative with how you're presenting your work. Everybody is going to be distracted in your presentation. When I schedule my reviews with my clients, the first 15 minutes I say nothing important. Those 15 minutes, they're checking their email on their phone or they're finishing up an email on their computer. So I know this. I make my design reviews longer because they're not paying attention. I don't want to get them to this place, but I definitely just want to keep them engaged. So, and to practice, I practice my presentations and my design reviews to make sure they have the flow and, and cadence. The thing that bothers me a lot when I see presentations is that sometimes you have a great idea, you've done all the work, and you have the content, and it's presented nicely, but your presentation's ugly. You want your presentation to elevate the content of your work. So if you're at the home stretch and you don't put in the final shine to it, don't present it. I'm just of that opinion that it really has to wow them. Like Don Draper, he's the whole show. You go in, you wow them, right? You look the part. Now, it's exciting times because we have a lot of ideas and we have the ability to make them happen and create them. But the difference between ideas that make it and ideas that don't make it is in their execution. So think about your context and your content and your presentation as you go forward. And just to leave you with this final thought that it's okay to start again. Like sometimes you go through a presentation and it's not awesome and it doesn't get you the result you want. But and you start to feel insecure about that idea because you think you're never going to find the magic again. That happens, right? But for me, I've realized like the tighter I hold on to an idea, the more attached I am and unwilling to bend from that idea, but I'm usually wrong, and that there's usually a better way to do something. So be open to all the possibilities.